Alrighty, all right, so the plan for today is to read through Koheles in its entirety in English, okay? And the purpose of this is there are several purposes of this. One is that it's always a good idea to get a macro view because that influences your micro view when you're learning it in particular. So the best way to get macro view is just reading the entire thing. The second purpose of this is to make ourselves aware of the structure of the book so we can get a sense of like the different parts because there are distinct sections. And if we do end up learning this for a long time, then it'll pay to be aware of it. Third is that these are not in any order, by the way. Third is that there is an impact of just reading it. Like you'll find that the Rambam will often use the term kore when he's talking about Torah Bechsav, and sometimes he's using it in a sense of like learning Torah Bechsav in depth, and he's just using the word kore because it's Torah Bechsav, so it's designed to be read. But then other times, like there is such a thing as kriyas Torah Bechsav, like these are books, they're meant to be read. Like when we listen to this in shul, we're not analyzing it, we're reading it. So there is a benefit in hearing it being read. And for people who are not native Hebrew speakers or native biblical Hebrew speakers, then it's best to hear it in the language that's most familiar to us, even if translation is not always exact. And we have to be aware that there are certain translations of fundamental points that like will prejudice you towards certain views. So I think this is a worthwhile thing to do anytime you're reading a Sefer of Tanakh, if you can. I mean, it's a big task to read all of Sefer Yirmiyahu or Yeshayahu, but something like Koheles, which is 12 chapters, it's not a big deal. And even if have any of you read Koheles straight through in English in the last 3 years?
No, but I have done it once.
Okay. So it's something that I don't know if you necessarily want to do it every year, but it is a good idea to read it like in its entirety every 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 year if possible. Thanks, Isaiah, for keeping your camera on. Much easier to talk to a human. All right, so let us read. And I think what we're going to do is I'm going to read, and then if you want to interrupt with a question or an observation or a comment, then please do so, because the whole reason why we're doing this together is so that we can have like these like little discussions about this. Okay. So this is my translation. This is not, I shouldn't say this is my translation. So what I did for this translation is I think I took Art Scroll, typed it all out, and then I just tweaked terms that struck me as either being translated inaccurately or like archaically, and then I also took the like loaded terms in English and just kept the Hebrew. So for example, I said here, when I encountered any major term or phrase which had several translations, I left it in the original Hebrew after translating it only once in the parentheses. The only exception is the term hevel, the translation which we will discuss in class. This was meant to be for the first Koheles lesson, so we've already discussed hevel. If you need to plug in a translation when reading, the standard translations for hevel are futility or nothingness. The phrase hevel hevelim in Koheles 1-2 may be translated as futility, futilities, or nothingness of nothingnesses. As I said, we'll discuss this more in class. And then all paragraph breaks are by the author, and they're very few. Okay, so we will read it again. Feel free to interrupt at any time, and I'll interrupt with comments as well. All right, and you kind of gotta have this, like, you gotta straddle the fence between letting it wash over you even when you don't understand it, and then like letting your mind seize upon certain things and saying like, wow, that's weird, that's crazy, and then like making observations about it and articulating it. All right, so we'll try this experiment. Okay. And we're going to read the first 11 psukim anyway, even though we've been learning them for the last couple of weeks. All right. The words of Koheles, son of David, king in Yerushalayim. Havel Havalim, said Koheles. Havel Havalim, everything is Havel. What Yisron does man have for all of his toil which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth endures forever. And the sun rises and the sun sets, then to its place it rushes, there it rises again. The wind goes toward the south and veers toward the north. The wind goes round, and on its rounds the wind returns. All rivers flow into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place where the rivers flow, there they return to flow. All devarim are wearying. One becomes speechless. The eye is never sated with seeing. nor the ear filled with hearing. Whatever has been is what will be, and whatever has been done is what will be done, and there's nothing new under the sun. Sometimes there is something of which one says, look, this is new. It has already existed in the ages before us. As there is no recollection of the former ones, so too of the latter ones that are yet to be, there will be no recollection among those of a still later time. One more point, by the way. Another benefit of doing this is for books like Koheles and Shir Shirim and certain parts of the Nevi'im, is that certain books of Tanakh are intentionally poetic, and part of the experience of poetry is hearing it, like just hearing it read and hearing it again, like letting it just impact you. And like I've heard that that's one of the big critiques of the way that Shakespeare is taught in high school. I was very turned off to poetry from the way I was taught about it in high school, so I never really got into it. But I was taught, I was informed that like one of the mistakes about Shakespearean poetry and plays is that the way it's taught in schools is kind of like the way that Chumash and Rashi is taught in schools here, of like you do a pasuk and then you do like the Rashi and you analyze it, and then you do another pasuk. And same thing with Shakespeare is like you have a line and then you analyze the line and then another line, and there's not enough of just like hearing it as a whole and like letting it affect you in all of its linguistic structure and like imagery and all that other stuff, and then going back and analyzing it later. So I've heard also that that's something that's being rectified now, but I don't think it's being rectified in Tanakh. I don't think it's encouraged very much to just like, read Tanakh, and let the poetry affect you. Okay, now
can I say a thing that I noticed? Or
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Just interestingly, I thought like this whole section, or a lot of a theme in this section, was how things are not new, and all the things that he talked about, the sun, the wind, rivers, are all not new. Like they're parts of the earth that just have been around.
That's a good point.
Like new.
Right. Yeah. That is a good point. Yeah. So we didn't notice that. We noticed in number 4 the juxtaposition of the eternal earth and the temporary generations, but I don't think I noticed that about all the phenomena. That's a good point. Okay, good. Okay, now we get to the point which we started but didn't really go on to here. Okay, so I, Koheles, was king over Israel in Yerushalayim. I applied my lave to investigate and explore with wisdom all that happens under the heavens. Now, lave, the reason why I didn't translate that is that lave is either mind or emotions, and I think the Mefarshim are split on how this is interpreted. And I don't know if it's a clean split, like every time lave is mentioned in Koheles, it's either mind or emotions, or if you have to infer it based on its context, but there is an intentional ambiguity in the Hebrew, and so I wanted to preserve that in English. And then I'll just say ahead of time, we're going to see the word ra. And so I've mentioned in the past that ra in Hebrew is evil, bad, destructive, harmful, corrupt, deficient. It's all negative types of words, but not necessarily morally charged. So I just wanted to avoid the moral connotation here. Okay, so he says, I'll start again. I applied my lave to investigate and explore with wisdom all that happens under the heavens. It is a raw task that God has given to the sons of man with which to be afflicted or occupied. Okay, another ambiguous Hebrew. It's la'anos bo, from the word either inui, of affliction, like ana, like like a tinus, or like inyan, like to be involved with. I have seen all the activities that are done under the sun, and behold, all is, well, I missed one here. I think it's supposed to say hevel. All is hevel and ru'us ruach, frustration of spirit, or ru'us is literally, so I think it's also a machlokus, or just, seen people translate it differently, whether ru'us comes from ra, or there's an obscure Shlomo HaMelech usage of ru'us. I don't know if it's elsewhere, but Shlomo uses it a lot, of breaking. Okay, so a breaking of spirit, or a badness of spirit, or a frustration of spirit, vexation of spirit. Our scroll says, "What is twisted cannot be made straight, and what is not there cannot be counted." I spoke with my lave, saying, "Here I have acquired great wisdom, more than any of my predecessors over Yerushalayim, and my lave has seen much wisdom and knowledge. I applied my lave to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I knew that this too is a rayon ruach," and that's a synonym for ru'us ruach, according to most. For with much wisdom comes much anger, and one who increases knowledge increases pain. I said to myself, "Come, I will experiment with simcha and enjoy pleasure." That too was havel. I said of schok, jesting, laughter, fooling around. It is madness. And of simcha, what does this accomplish? Okay, and again, simcha also here. I didn't translate it because simcha could either mean joy or rejoicing or partying or like slash celebrating. So very unclear when he says simcha throughout the entire text, which of those he means or if he means multiple ones. So what does this accomplish? With my lave, I explored the stimulation of my body with wine, while my lave directed me with wisdom and to grasp folly until I can discern what is good for mankind to do under the heavens during the brief span of their lives. I acted in grand style. I built myself houses. I planted vineyards. I made for myself gardens and orchards and planted in them every kind of fruit tree. I constructed pools from which to irrigate a grove of young trees. I bought slaves, male and female, and I acquired stewards. I also owned more possessions, both cattle and sheep, than all of my predecessors in Yerushalayim. I accumulated even silver and gold for myself and the treasures of kings and provinces. I provided myself with various musical instruments and with every luxury, with all kinds of chariots. Thus I grew and surpassed all of my predecessors in Yerushalayim. Still my wisdom stayed with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not deny them. I did not deprive my lave of any kind of simcha, for my lave drew simcha from all my toil, and this was my chelik in all of my toil. Then I turned and looked at all the things I had done and all the toil I had toiled in doing them. It was clear that it was all Havel and Re'us Ruach, and there's no Yisron under the sun. This whole section, by the way, I in my mind, I dubbed this the experiment. I don't know if that's an accurate description, but this is him experiencing different things and getting results. And that will take us through the end of chapter 2. Then I turned my attention to appraising wisdom with madness and folly. For what can man who comes after the king do? It has already been done. And I perceive that wisdom excels folly as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but a fool walks in darkness. But I also realized that the same fate awaits them all. So I said to my lave, the fate of the fool will befall me also. Why then have I become wiser? But I spoke in my lave, saying, this too is Havel. For there is no remembrance of the wise man with the fool at all. For as the succeeding days roll by, all is forgotten. How can the wise man die with a fool? So I hated life, for all that is done under the sun was Ra, because everything is Hevel and a Re'us Ruach. Thus I hated all of my toil which I toiled under the sun, for I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be wise or foolish. And he will have control of all my possessions for which I toiled and have shown myself wiser under the sun. This too is Havel. Now this is really where you can see that Metzudas David's approach, that the whole thing is about the acquisition of possessions. Tremendous emphasis on that here. This too is Havel. So I turned my lave to despair of all that I had achieved by toiling under the sun. For there is a man who toiled with wisdom, knowledge, and improvement, yet he must give over his chelik to one who has not toiled for it. This too is Havel and a great Ra'ah. For what is there for a man in all his toil and in his stress which he toils under the sun? For all his days are painful, and his occupation causes anger. Even at night his mind has no rest. This too is Havel. Is it not good for man that he eats and drinks and shows his soul satisfaction in his toil? And even that I perceived is from the hand of God. For who should eat and who should make haste except me? To the man who pleases him, he has given every wisdom. He has given wisdom, knowledge, and simcha. But to the sinner, he has given the task to gather and amass, that he may give it over to one who is pleasing to God. That too is Hevel and Re'us Ruach. Okay, let's pause here for a second. Any thoughts or impressions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said just a moment ago about how you could see for the Metzudas David gets his approach about Yisroel, but
Yeah.
he also calls his experiment with Simcha. He attributes there being no Yisron in that also.
That's a good point.
Really a Subas.
Right. So I guess maybe the question then is maybe we would have to see the Metzudas David here, but like maybe what he calls asifas hakinyanim is not just wealth, but also includes like the enjoyment of the wealth and like the benefits of the wealthy lifestyle. Because that certainly is what he's doing seems like what he's doing in the thing where he's like, buying himself all this stuff. Like these are all like pleasurable purchases. He doesn't talk. I mean, he mentions. Hold on. He mentions money, right? But it seems like he's using the money as a means to like build his empire and his possessions. So maybe that's it. It's a good question though.
It does seem like in that section, to me at least, that the theme is Simcha. Like he's not really looking for kinyanim there. Like he's
that's also
wine
true. Right. In other words, first he starts off with the in number 1 and 2, experiment with Simcha and enjoy pleasure. This too is Havel. I said of Skok, it is madness, and Simcha, what has this accomplished? And then he goes on with simcha that's related to his possessions and purchases, and that's much longer, right? So it might be that there's two phases of the simcha thing. Yeah. Okay. All right. So then we have a break here. Okay. Then we get to the famous a time. Okay. And this is a clear break in the text because it's organized like this. Everything has its season, and there's a time for every desire under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot the planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break through and a time to build, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to eulogize and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to hug and a time to distance oneself from hugging during COVID, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. So that's like something going on there. And like it's an interruption in the flow of the text. It's its own form. He never returns to this theme in such an explicit way. So like
what happened to I hated life?
Yeah, right. Right. So I guess that changed. And that actually is another question, is that chapter I guess from chapter 1 pasuk 12 until the end of chapter 2, which is what I'm calling the experiment, that's all a narrative. So he presumably was doing this in real life, or if you're going to say that he didn't actually do this, he's writing it as someone who did it. So the question is like, where does the rest of the book fall out in the timeline? Like, is the rest of the book afterwards? Like, or is it like him extrapolating on what he found? This does not seem like part of the narrative in chapter 3. Like, so just where does it fit in? And he never returns to the narrative until the very end. So, or at least not in something that's evidently a narrative. Okay. All right. So then this is the part where I totally lose the structure. Okay. I really like from here until like chapter 11, I really don't discern any structures. This is what I call the middle of Koheles. And you'll notice that it sounds like he's making arguments. And then at a certain point, he switches over into what sounds like Koheles style Mishlei Psukim. Okay. Where each pasuk is a different topic. All right. So we'll see what happens now. All right. I'll try to pause every once in a while just to see what we think. Okay. What Yisron is there for he who acts in all of his toil? I have seen the matter with which God has given the sons of man to be preoccupied with. He made everything beautiful in its time. He has also put eternity into their lave, without man being able to comprehend that which God has made from beginning to end. I knew that there is nothing better for them than to have simcha and to do good in his life. Indeed, every man who eats and drinks and finds satisfaction in all his toil, this is a gift from God. I knew that whatever God does will endure, nothing can be added to it and nothing can be subtracted from it. And God has acted so that man should be in fear before him. What has been already exists, and what is still to be has already been, and God seeks the pursued. See, stuff like that, I just have no idea what that means. Furthermore, I've seen under the sun, in the place of justice, there is wickedness, and in the place of righteousness, there is wickedness. Oh, I mentioned this earlier. I should mention this now that we're going to the middle of Koheles. As we go, I mentioned that one of the ways I found the theme of Koheles is I color-coded all the psukim by theme. So let's say, for example, here you have, in 14, you have Yiras Hashem. That we know is a theme because of the end of the book. Then you have here, justice. Okay. Earlier you had chachma. Earlier you had possessions. So as we go through, just be aware, like make a mental note of what themes you're seeing passing by and which ones he returns to and which ones only show up once. Okay. So furthermore, I have seen under the sun, in place of justice, there is wickedness, and in the place of righteousness, there is wickedness. I said in my lave, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for everything and for every deed. I said in my lave, concerning the matters of mankind, let them attempt to discern God, to see that they themselves are as beasts. For the fate of man and the fate of beasts, they have one and the same fate. As one dies, so dies the other, and they all have one spirit. Man has no superiority over the beast, for all is Havel. All go to the same place, all originate from the dust, and all will return to the dust. Who knows the spirit of man that it ascends on high, and the spirit of the beast that descends down to the earth? I saw that there is nothing better for man to than to find simcha in his deeds, for that is his chelek. For who can enable him to see what will be after him? So again, we saw this in the first or second shir, that this is an example of why they wanted to ban Koheles, because it seems to contradict the Yesodei HaTorah. It seems to be saying there's no difference between man and beast. Everything goes to the dust. The fate of man is the same, and just like, find sympathy in your deeds, because that's all you got, unclear what that is. All right. I returned and contemplated all the acts of oppression that are committed under the sun. Behold, tears of the oppressed with none to comfort them, and their oppressors have the power with none to comfort them. So I considered more fortunate the dead who have already died than the living who are still alive. But better than either of them is he who has not yet been and has never witnessed the Ra that is committed under the sun. And I saw that all toil and all efforts of improvement spring from man's jealousy of his neighbor. This too is Hevel and a Re'us Ruach. The fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. Better is one handful of pleasantness than two fistfuls of labor and Re'us Ruach. That's what I meant by like the Mishlaic type sukkim here. They sound very proverbial. Then
is there like a shot? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Is there like a shot of what it means that the oppressors have power with none to comfort them? Like, is that supposed to mean anything on the surface?
Oh, I thought the with none to comfort them is the oppressed.
Okay, even though it's twice.
Tears of the oppressed with none to comfort them, and their oppressors have the power. Like, that's like an interjection. Tears of the oppressed with none to comfort them, and their oppressors have the power with none to comfort them. Yeah, it's like for emphasis. That's how I understood it. Yeah, I don't know if that's pshat. That's just how I understood it. Yeah. Okay. Then I returned and contemplated another Hevel under the sun, a lone and solitary man who has neither son nor brother, yet there's no end to his toil, nor is his eye sated with riches, nor does he ask himself, for whom am I toiling? Or I guess that's our scroll brackets. For whom am I toiling and depriving myself of goodness? This too is Hevel. Indeed, it is a raw task. Two are better than one, for they get a greater return for their toil. For should they fall, one can lift the other, but woe to him who is alone when he falls, and there's none to lift him. Also, if two lie down together, they keep warm, but how can one be warm alone? Where one can be overpowered, two can resist attack. A three-ply cord is not easily severed. Now, that's an example of where it's clearly, this is one patch of psukim that are either one argument or, like Mishlei, a cluster of individual ideas on one topic. The solitary person versus the person who has a companion or two, I guess, if that's the three-ply cord. I don't really know. Yeah.
So one thing that I think I noticed is, like, for the last parak since chapter 3 began, it's like there's a lot of swinging back and forth between things that are either like an injustice or they're havel or they're some kind of seemingly bad part of creation, and then like swinging back sometimes and saying, oh no, there's actually this like good thing. I think we're definitely a lot of exploring havel and maybe sometimes trying to like contradict that.
Mm-hmm. Good. And I think it contradicts it in two ways, which is that sometimes you'll see him say, usually not next to each other, but he'll actually sometimes next to each other. Sometimes he'll say about the same subject, it's unjust and it's hevel and it's frustrating, and then he'll in the next breath say that it's good, or vice versa. And then sometimes he'll say, like, this whole topic A is frustrating, and therefore eating and drinking is good. Yeah. So you're right. A lot of switching back and forth in the what's bad and what's good, or what's hevel and what's worthwhile.
Another thing that I was thinking about is perhaps you could say like the first pasuk of parak 3, like right after the part that didn't seem to fit, is maybe like a header of some sort, where it just says all of man's toil is. Oh, sorry, is it chapter 4?
Oh, is it chapter 4?
After the time to.
The
time to this.
Chapter 4. There we go.
What? Just no. Pasuk 9 in chapter 3.
Pasuk 9 in 4.
Chapter 3 in 3 and 3.
There we go. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. That what Yisron is there for he who acts in all of his toil. Seems just like an introduction to this whole section.
Yes, and that fits in very well with my approach to Koheles, that the whole thing is about Yisron, and so that there he's reiterating the thesis that the intro of Koheles said, but that was the intro, and this is in the actual book. Yeah, good observation. I didn't notice that either. Okay. This is the other benefit, by the way, of reading it in a group and reading it all together, because I've read Koheles a lot, and because I already have an approach to it, I what do you call it, confirmation bias. Not, I don't want to be that. It's not necessarily confirmation bias in the sense that I only am looking for things that confirm my view and like neglecting other stuff, but my attention hones in on either things that are in line with my view or sheds a light on them or that is in line with my view, and I don't notice other ways of reading it. So I'm glad that you're bringing new light to the text. All right. See, 2 are better than 1 for the have a greater return for the toil, and 3 flight quarter is not easily severed. Okay. Better is a okay. All right. Yeah, here you go. Better is a poor but wise youth than an old and foolish king who no longer knows how to take care of himself. Because from the prison he emerged to reign, while even in his reign he was born poor. All right. Now this I actually have to stop and talk about, not because of Koheles, but because of Mishle. Okay. Koheles does return to this, but this is what we call the mushal of the youth and the king, the wise youth and the foolish old king. The Meiri makes a big deal about this in his Pirush on Mishle, and brief outline of his Pirush on Mishle is he will interpret each pasuk in what he calls the derech nigle and the derech nister, the open meaning and the concealed meaning. The open meaning is often about how to make decisions in everyday life, and talking about like the material benefits of Chachma, and the derech nister is talking about working on perfection of your soul, on learning, on like the the inner life. And what he does is in the derech nister, I guess because it's nister, because it's hidden, he will often express the idea in mushal form, and he'll often use this mushal. Okay, he'll, instead of telling you the idea, he'll talk about the wise youth and the old king, and he won't decode the mushal. But what it's a mushal for, the wise youth is I think Chazal themselves say this, that the wise youth is a mushal for the Yetzer HaTov, the intellect, and the old foolish king is a mushal for the Yetzer Hara, because Chazal say that the Yetzer Hara has a 13-year head start on the Yetzer HaTov. That you're all Yetzer Hara until you're bar bat mitzvah, when your intellect begins to exert an influence over your life. That's your Yetzer HaTov. So, in comparison to the Yetzer Hara, then the Yetzer Tov is young, whereas the Yetzer Hara is old. And also, we're going to see later on, he refers to the Yetzer Hara as a king, because he has command of the body. Whereas, just like as in a kingdom, it's very, very hard for a poor youth to have any sort of real influence over anything. So too the and the king has the real say. So too here in the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, that's very hard for the intellect to have influence over stuff. Okay, we're at 15, right? Yeah. I saw all the living that wander beneath the sun. I just lost my place. Oh, I saw all the living that wander beneath the sun throng to the succeeding youth who steps into his place. There's no end to the entire nation, to all that was before him. Similarly, the ones that will come later will not rejoice in them. This too is Hevel and Orion Ruach. Guard your foot when you go to the house of God. Better to draw near and hearken to offer the sacrifices of fools, for they do not think that they do Ra. Be not rash with your mouth, and do not let your lave be hasty to utter a word before God, for God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. We mentioned this 2 weeks ago. Yeah, 2 weeks ago, when Yaakov was flipping through the Mikros Gedolos, and he said, whoa. And I said, did you encounter the Ibn Ezra's essay against Paitanim? This is where he writes his essay, and it's all basically a rant triggered by the words, do not be rash with your mouth, do not let your lave be hasty to utter a word before God, for God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few, which he translates into don't add piyutim. Okay, and when you add piyutim, then like only add the ones that are in plain direct Hebrew, that don't like use metaphors that are crazy, and like he goes on a whole rant against the Paitanim. So if you ever want an essay on that, then you got that there. Okay. For a dream comes from much concern, and foolish talk from many words. When you make a vow to God, do not delay paying it, for he has no liking for fools. What you vow, pay. Better that you do not vow at all than that you vow and not pay. Do not let your mouth bring guilt upon your flesh, and do not tell the messenger that it was an error. Why should God be angered by your speech and destroy the work of your hands? In a multitude of dreams, havalim, and words, rather, fear God. If you see oppression of the poor and the suppression of justice and right in the state, do not be astonished at desire, for there is one higher than high who watches, and there are high ones above them. The advantage of the land is supreme. Even a king is enslaved to the soil. A lover of money will not be satisfied by money. A lover of abundance has no wheat. This too is hevel. So this is really Mishlaic. Like, not even continuity necessarily between the psukim, just like proverb. Although like Koheles flavored. Yeah.
Rabbi Shimon. Oh, what I found was weird, talking about how you should worship God or like, fear God and stuff, and now all of a sudden another hafel.
Yes. Yeah. Right. That's true. Very rapid. Can you guys hear that? The Dinsmore noises?
A little bit.
Yeah,
Okay.
a little.
Yeah.
That was from bingo, right?
Oh my.
Are those the bingo characters?
Yes.
Oh.
I just want to make sure no one's getting injured. He was angry. I think he's okay now. Okay. All right. Yeah. All right.
Do you think that pasuk 7 over here is like contradicting or like commenting on the stuff about oppression before?
Yes, right. Because above he was bemoaning the state of that, and here he's saying, like, there's one who's higher who watches them, right? Which sounds like they are under hashgacha. Yeah, it's a good point. Okay. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. What advantage then has the owner except what his eyes see? Sweet is the sleep of the laborer, whether he eats much, little, or much. The satiety of the rich does not let him sleep. I always think of this one when I think about how much money I'm not making, and like the pains that come with money. There is a sickening ra which I've seen under the sun, wealth hoarded by their owner to his ra, and he loses those riches in some ra manner. If he begets a son, he has nothing in his hand. As he emerged from his mother's womb naked, he will return as he has come. He can salvage nothing from his toil to take with him. This too is a sickening ra. Exactly as he came, he must depart. And what did he gain by toiling for the wind? Indeed, all his life he eats in darkness. He is greatly grieved and has illness and anger. So what I have seen to be good is that it is suitable to eat and drink and enjoy pleasure with all one's labor that he toils under the sun during the brief span of his life that God has given him, for that is his chelek. Furthermore, every man to whom God has given riches and possessions and has given him the power to enjoy them, to bear his chelek and to find simcha in his toil, this is the gift of God. For he shall remember that the days of his life are not many, while God provides him with the simcha of his lave.
So
There's a
question
ra.
about that.
Yeah.
So was this? So he had the extended comment about how wealth is bad. So then was the second half from let's say 17 onwards, was that that could be in contrast to the first part, the first part about the wealth, but it also seems like maybe it could just be like a separate thing.
I think it's in contrast to the first part, because he's saying he bemoans like the people who hoard wealth and then can't take anything with them, and he says, so you basically might as well just enjoy your possessions, and eat and drink and enjoy pleasure, like basically spend your wealth and enjoy that rather than just trying to hoard it when you can't take it with you. That's how I understand it.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. There is a ra I have observed under the sun, and it is prevalent among mankind. A man to whom God has given riches, wealth, and honor, and he lacks nothing that the lave could desire, yet God did not give him the power to enjoy it. Instead, a stranger will enjoy it. This is hevel and a great ra. If a man begets 100 children and lives many years, great being the days of his life, and his soul is not content with the good, and he is even deprived of burial, I say the stillborn is better off than he. Though its coming is hevel and it departs in darkness, though its very name is enveloped in darkness, though it never saw the sun nor knew it, it has more satisfaction than he. Even if he should live 1,000 years twice over, but find no contentment, do not all go to the same place? All man's toil is for his mouth, yet his wants are never satisfied. What advantage then has the wise man over the fool? What less has the pauper who knows how to conduct himself among the living? Better is what the eyes see than what is imagined. So that too is hevel and rus ruach. What has been was already named, and it is known that he is but man. a man. He cannot contend with one who is mightier than he. There are many things that increase Hevel. How does it benefit man? Who can possibly know what is good for man in life during the short span of his Hevel existence, which he should consider like a shadow? Who can tell a man what will be after him under the sun? Yeah, I mean, that's another example of contradiction. So that contradicts the end where he says that Sof Tavar Kol Nishma Es Elokim Yirav Es Mitzvosav Shemor Kizeh Kol Ha'adam. Now you could say he changed his mind in the middle, but like he does say at the end how a person should spend their lives. Okay, and then we get this random paragraph break. That was all one paragraph. Okay, I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if that's actually like significant or not, but like we get a paragraph break. Okay. A good name is better than good oil, and the day of death than the day of birth. This is another theme, if you notice, by the way, praising death versus praising life and bemoaning death, right? That's that he goes back and forth on that question. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of simcha, for that is the end of all man, and the living should take it to lave. Anger is better than jesting, for through a sad face the lave is improved. The mind of the wise are in the house of mourning, but the mind of the fool is in the house of simcha. It is better to listen to the rebuke of a wise man than for one to listen to the song of fools. For like the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool, and this too is Havel. Back in the olden days, I associate this pasuk to the fact that back when I first started reading Koheles, when I would spend Simchas Torah in a shul that often was very raucous, and they would just like spin, like people would get drunk and like they would just dance and sing a lot. I would just sit there reading Koheles, and I always used to associate to that pasuk, better to listen to the rebuke of a wise man than to listen to the songs of fools. And I used to be like, okay, Shalom, like at least it's just you and me. But that's my own personal association. For oppression makes the wise foolish, and a gift corrupts the lave. The end of a matter is better than its beginning. Patience is better than pride. Do not be hastily upset, for anger lingers in the laps of fools. Do not say, how is it that former times were better than these? For that is not a question prompted by wisdom. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, and a boon to those who see the sun. For in the shadow of wisdom is in the shadow of money, and the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of its possessors. Observe God's doing, for who can straighten what he has twisted? On a good day, enjoy it, but on a bad day, reflect. God has made the one as well as the other, so that man should find nothing after him. I have seen everything during the days of my Hevel. Sometimes a righteous man perishes for all his righteousness, and sometimes a wicked man endures for all his wickedness. Do not be overly righteous nor excessively wise. Why be left desolate? Do not be overly wicked nor be a fool. Why die before your time? It is better to grasp the one and not let go of the other. He who fears God does them all. Wisdom strengthens the wise man more than 10 rulers who are in the city. For there is no man who's so wholly righteous on earth that he always does good and never sins. Moreover, pay no attention to everything people say, lest you hear your own servant disparaging you. For your slave knows that many times you yourself have disparaged others. All of this I tested with wisdom. I thought I could become wise, but it is beyond me. What existed is so elusive and so deep, so very deep, who can fathom it? So I turned my attention to study and probe and seek wisdom and reckoning, and to know the wickedness of folly and the foolishness which is madness. And I've discovered more bitter than death, the woman who is snares, whose lave is nets, whose arms are chains. He who is pleasing to God escapes her, but the sitter is caught by her. Sorry, I'm pretty sure this is the pasuk that is the subject of one of those amusing midrashim, where I forgot who it is. Let's say Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, "I discovered." I think Rabbi Yochanan said to his son, "I have discovered more bitter than death, the woman who is snares. This is your mother." I think he says something like that. It's either your mother or like my wife or something like that. I don't know. Okay. See, this is what I found, said Koheles, adding one to another to reach a conclusion, which yet my soul seeks, but I have not found. Question, by the way, for those who are in Rabbi Zimmer's shir, I'd be curious if you ask him if this woman is the same woman as the woman in Mishlei that he says is a mashal for heresy. I don't know the answer, and I don't know what he holds, and I don't know what Rashi holds, but these are two like bad women characters. Assuming that this is
There's only one woman.
Oh, there's only one woman. Okay.
Oh no, sorry, that was a joke.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. See, this is what I found, said Koheles, adding one to another to reach a conclusion, which yet my soul seeks, but I have not found. One man in 1,000 I found, but one woman among them I have not found. So I guess here he didn't find Eshes Chayil yet. But see, this I did find. God has made man upright, but they have sought many calculations. Who is like the wise man, and who knows what things mean? A man's wisdom lights up his face, and the boldness of his face is transformed, unless his zoom camera is off. I counsel you, obey the king's command, and that in the manner of an oath of God. Do not hasten to leave his presence. Do not persist in an evil thing, for he can do whatever he pleases. Since a king's word is law, who would dare say to him, what are you doing? He who obeys the commandment will know no evil, and a wise mind will know time and justice. By the way, this is another ambiguous thing here. When he talks about kings, unclear sometimes whether he's talking about himself or kings in general or God. It's very unclear which one he means. He who obeys the commandment will know no evil, and a wise man will know time and justice. For everything has its time and justice, for man's evil overwhelms him. Indeed, he does not know what will happen, for when it happens, who will tell him? Man is powerless over the spirit to restrain the spirit. I should have actually put the word ruach in here. Man is powerless over the wind to restrain the wind. I'm not sure if it means spirit or wind. Nor is there ruler over the day of death, nor discharge in war, and wickedness cannot save the wrongdoer. All this I have seen, and I applied my lave to everything deed that is done under the sun. There's a time when one man rules over another to his detriment. And then I saw the wicked buried and newly come, while those who had done right were gone from the holy place and were forgotten in the city. This too is Hevel. Because the sentence for wrongdoing is not executed quickly, that is why the hearts of men are filled to do evil. Because a sinner does what is raw 100 times, and he is patient with him, yet nevertheless I'm aware that it will be well with those who fear God, those who show fear before him. And that it will not be good for the wicked, and he will not long endure like a shadow because he does not fear God. That was one long run-on sentence. There is a hevel that takes place on earth. Sometimes there are righteous men who are treated as if they had done the deeds of the wicked, and there are wicked men who are treated as if they had done the deeds of the righteous. I declared this to his hevel. So I praised Simcha, for a man has no other good under the sun but to eat, drink, and to have Simcha, and this will accompany him in his toil during the days of his life, which God has given him under the sun. When I set my life to know wisdom and to observe the matter which takes place on earth, for even day or night its eyes see no sleep, and I saw all the work of God. Indeed, man cannot fathom the events that occur under the sun, inasmuch as man tries strenuously to search, but cannot fathom it. And even though a wise man should presume to know, he cannot fathom it. Yeah.
So why is he turning back to Simcha now, even though very far in the beginning he scorned it?
Right. And this is not the only time he did it. He also did it in chapter 7, and I think a little bit in chapter 4. So he does return to it. And one of the questions I think that I want to focus on when we analyze it, which I haven't gotten a chance to do, is to note like what the differences are in his treatment of Simcha at each time. That seems to be an important part of the book. For all of this I noted, and I applied my life to all this, that the righteous and the wise together with their actions are in the hand of God. Whether love or hate, man does not know. All preceded them. All things come to all alike to all. The same fate awaits the righteous and the wicked, the good and the clean and the unclean, the one who brings a sacrifice and the one who does not bring a sacrifice. As is the good man, so is the sinner. As is the one who swears, so is the one who fears an oath. This is a ra about all things that go on under the sun, that the same fate awaits them all. Therefore, the lave of man is full of ra, and madness is in their lave while they live, and after that they go to the dead. For he who is attached to all living has hope, for a live dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing at all. There is no more reward for them, their memory is forgotten. Their love, their hate, their jealousy have already perished, nor will they ever again have a chelik in whatever is done under the sun. Here comes another Simcha passage. Go eat your bread with Simcha and drink your wine with a glad lave, for God has already approved of your deeds. Let your garments always be white and your head never lack oil. Enjoy life with the wife you love through all the hevel days of your life, which he has granted you beneath the sun, all the days of your hevel. For that is your chelik in your life and in your toil, which you exert beneath the sun. Whatever you were able to do with your ability, do it, for there's neither doing, nor reckoning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave where you are going. By the way, I mentioned this to Isaiah and Isaac after Yom HaKippurim before Mariv. This pasuk is what they darshan for the time period we're in right now. Go eat your bread with Simcha and drink your wine with a glad lave, for God has already proved your deeds. This is the time period between between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, that God has already proved of your deeds because you got kapara, and you should go eat your bread with Simcha and drink wine. Either that's reference to, I think some the Aruch HaShulchan says that this is the source of the fact that there's a mitzvah to have to treat these intermediate days as days of Simcha and to have a festive meal the day after Yom Kippur. And I think some say that this is talking about the Simcha of actual Sukkot.
That's weird. That's weird because I feel like he's saying it sarcastically here.
Yeah, I thought so too, right? And this is the hard part. I mentioned in the Rabag I mentioned that it's hard to know which of the statements are true and which ones are expressing false ideas, and you got Mefarshim debating about whether this pasuk is an expression of the wrong idea of eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, or if this is his actual thesis on happiness. Very hard.
Just 2 seconds later, he says, "Go enjoy it." life with the wife you love through all the hevel days of your life.
Yes, that's the other thing, is that he's speaking about it in a very Koheles type way, even when talking about the positive stuff. And that, you're right, that adds to the seeming sarcasm there. Okay. Once more I saw under the sun that the race is not won by the swift, nor the battle by the strong, nor does bread come to the wise, riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the learned, but time and death will happen to them all. Again, another contradiction. I mean, there's a lot. I haven't been pointing out the contradictions, but this one just struck me. Earlier you said that in the wisdom in the shadow of wisdom is the shadow of riches, that you get rich when you're wealthy, but now he's saying bread doesn't come to the wise. All right, for man does not know even know his hour. Like fish caught in a fatal net, like birds seized in a snare, so are men caught in the moment of disaster when it falls upon them suddenly. This too I have observed about wisdom under the sun, and it affected me profoundly. There was a small town. Oh, here comes another muscle with the king and the youth. There was a small town with only a few inhabitants, and a mighty king came upon it and surrounded it and built great siege works over it. Present in the city was a poor wise man who by his wisdom saved the town, yet no one remembered that poor man. So I said, wisdom is better than might, although a poor man's wisdom is despised and his words go unheeded. The gentle words of the wise are heard above the shouts of a king over fools, and wisdom is better than weapons, but a single sinner can ruin a great deal of good. Okay. Dead flies putrefy the perfumer's oil, and a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. A wise man's mind is to his right, while a fool's mind is to the left, his left. If you need a good political quote and that suits your politics, then remember that. Even on the road as a fool walks, he lacks sense and proclaims to all that he is a fool. If the anger of a ruler flares up against you, do not leave your place, for deference appeases great offenses. There's a ra'ah which I've observed beneath the sun, as if it were an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly is placed on lofty heights, while rich men sit in low places. I have seen slaves on horses and nobles walking on foot like slaves. He who digs a pit will fall into it, and he who breaks down a wall will be bitten by a snake. He who moves about stones will be hurt by them. He who splits logs will be endangered by them. If an axe is blunt and one has not honed the edge, nevertheless it strengthens the warriors. Wisdom is a more powerful skill. If the snake bites without being charmed, there is no advantage to the charmer's art. If the words of wise men win favor, but a fool's lips devour him. His talk begins as foolishness and ends as evil madness. The fool prattles on and on, but man does not know what will be, and who can tell what will happen after him. The toil of fools exhausts them, as one who does not know the way to town. Woe to you, O land, whose king acts as an adolescent, and whose ministers dine in the morning. Happy are you, O land, whose king is a man of dignity, and whose ministers dine at the proper time, in strength and not in drunkenness. Through slothfulness the ceiling sags, and through idleness of the hands the house leaks. For laughter bread is made, and wine gladdens life, but money answers everything. Even in your thoughts do not curse the king, and even in your bedchamber do not curse the rich. For a bird of the skies may carry the sound, and some winged creature may betray the matter. Send your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it. Distribute portions to 7 and also to 8, for you never know what calamity will strike the land. If the clouds are filled, they will pour down rain on the earth. If a tree falls down in the south or in the north, wherever the tree falls, there it remains. One who watches the wind will never sow, and one who keeps his eyes on the clouds will never reap. Just as you do not know the way of the wind, nor the nature of the embryo in a pregnant belly, so you can never know the work of God who makes everything. In the morning sow your seed, and in the evening do not be idle, for you cannot know which will be suitable, this or that, or whether both are equally good. Sweet is the light, and it is good for the eyes to behold the sun. Even if man lives many years, let him have simcha in all of them, but let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is havel. Have simcha in your man. This is the last simcha reference. Have simcha, young man, in your childhood. Let your lave cheer you in the days of your youth. Follow the path of your lave and the sight of your eyes, but be aware that for all these things God will call you to account. Rather banish anger from your lave and remove ra'ah from your flesh, for childhood and youth are havel. Pause here before chapter 12. Anything?
Well, those last two psukim sound like a pretty direct contradiction.
Yes, right. Have simcha in your childhood, and remember that childhood and youth are havel. Right. Okay, now
I'd be interested to know like what his idea of lave is, because
yeah,
here
right. You can see how it seems inconsistent, right?
yeah, because here you're saying like let your lave cheer you in the days of your youth, like seems different than a lot of other times that he's used.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and you notice also sometimes he says like he probed and explored with his lave, which seems like his mind, and then cheer of the lave sounds like an emotions type thing. Okay, chapter 12 to me has a magical quality. I said that I'm not into poetry. Something about 12 is extremely poetic and unnerving. Okay, when you read it in English, and I don't know what it is. Everyone takes this as a mushal. And the mushal is very hard to understand. So I don't know what it is. You tell me after I read I'm not going to read all of chapter 12. I'm just going to read the first part. You tell me if you get this, like, there's like I don't know, for me, there's like an existential chill that you suddenly get when you hear it, okay? Maybe I'm building it up too much. We'll see. Okay, here we go. Remember your creator in the days of your youth, before the days of Ra'ah come and those years arrive of which you will say, I have no desire in them. Before the sun, the light, the moon, and the stars grow dark, and the clouds return after the rain. In the day when the guards of the house will tremble, and the powerful men will stoop, and the grinders are idle because they are few, and the gazers through the windows are dimmed, when the doors in the street are shut, when the sound of grinding is low, when one rises up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of song grow dim, when they even fear height and a terror in the road, and the almond tree blossoms, and the grasshopper becomes a burden, and the desire fails, so man goes to his eternal home, while the mourners go about the streets. Before the silver cord snaps, and the golden bowl is shattered, and the pitcher is broken at the fountain, and the wheel is smashed at the pit. The dust returns to the ground as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Havel Havalim, said Koheles, everything is Havel. Anyone get what I'm talking about?
I actually didn't. I felt like a different, like I feel kind of like he's trying to arouse people in this section.
Interesting. I mean, he does
Because-
in the beginning. He definitely does in the beginning.
I feel like the whole thing is trying to break you of your immortality, like, notion.
Okay, so
Like-
you actually happen to have intuited what all the Mefarshim say that this is about. They all say it's about death, okay? And spoiler alert, I guess we'll get to this if we get to it. Rashi says that each of these mashalim is a mashal for aging, and then death, and then the decomposition of the corpse bit by bit. Okay, so it's a vivid depiction that is designed to break your immortality fantasy. Anyone else have any reactions or observations about this? I just think it paints like a bleak picture, you know, like the gazers through the windows are deemed. You've got people trembling and stooped. You've got like, these sounds. You've got things breaking. The mourners going around about the streets. I think that's where like this bleak picture comes in. Now, this is the end of Koheles proper. Okay, this next part, even though there's no paragraph break, reads like an epilogue, and it even talks about him in the third person. So it could be that this is just in the same style as the intro, or it could be that if the intro was a different author, then this is also a different author. But it gives like an epilogue about the author. Okay. And besides being wise, Koheles also imparted knowledge to the people. He listened and sought out and arranged many mishalim. Woot, woot. Koheles sought to find words of delight and words of truth recorded properly. The words of the wise are like goads, and the nails well driven are the sayings of the masters of collections coming from one shepherd. Beyond these, my son, beware. The making of many books is without limit, and much study is weariness of the flesh. The sum of the matter, when all has been considered, fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the entirety of man. For God will judge every deed, even everything hidden, whether good or evil. There you go. So
that
there you have
reminded me
Koheles.
about Marcus Aurelius.
Yes, yeah. I definitely get that vibe as well, right? With are you talking about the books thing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
the-
studying is much wearying of the flesh. Yeah, good call. All right, so that's the book. Okay, hopefully it was or will be beneficial to have seen this in its entirety for when we go into the details. Certainly structurally, I think it was important to be aware of the intro, and then like the experiment, and then the time for everything, and then the middle, and then like patches in the middle of common themes, and then like the simcha psukim punctuating the whole thing, and then like the Koheles conclusion, and then the epilogue. You know, I think that's like a good structure to have in mind. Okay, so let us end for tonight, and then we'll return and vote on whether we do something Sukkot related or just question and answer. Okay. All righty.
Sounds good.
Stop recording, and I'll see you later.